Patricia Wilson owns a multi-million-dollar interior design firm in Dallas. Like many women entrepreneurs, she wanted no part of corporate life from the very beginning. It was the attitude.
The men in Dallas, well, in Texas, are much more, I don't know any other way to describe it than macho. I mean, they're just, they're not as used to seeing professional women as, say, Washington, D.C. or New York.
Beverly Brooks has her own financial planning firm. She tried corporate life once and found the same male attitude.
I knew that a lot of them went on hunting trips together, and I knew that a lot of things got talked about there because they would be at a different level the next time of their understanding or their agreement on something, and you wondered where that had occurred, whether it had occurred on the pheasant hunt or something like that.
Gloria Hix took a more conventional path. She rose through the ranks at Sears Roebucks and Company to become one of their first female store managers.
I think anybody who goes into the corporate life has to realize that there's a game going on, and anytime I speak to groups of students, particularly females, and I did recently at the University of Texas, I told them, first of all, realize that there's a corporate game. Many women never realize that there's a game going on.
Whether they realize it or not, a lot of young women today are trying to get to where the corporate games are played. That's why at schools like Texas A&M, where young women fill the lecture halls, Beverly Brooks tries to explain the subtle rules of corporate life.
We were conditioned by the media all around us, the romantic novels, television that emerged in the 50s. Can you believe that there was not always television? That someone was going to come along and take care of us, and that our role in life was to perhaps go to college until Mr. Wonderful found us, or we found him and didn't let him get away. He would come by on the white horse, he would take us away, and everything would be wonderful.
I was in the era where everybody went into teaching. And the thinking, all the women, I mean, that's what you did when you went to college. And the thinking behind it, and his thinking behind it, was that you get a teacher's certificate so that if something happened to your husband, but of course you would be married, you would have something to fall back on. And maybe say...
It's hard to imagine Trish Wilson, single and in her 40s, would need anything to fall back on. Despite residual prejudice against women in this male-dominated field of interior design, Wilson is in demand on a range of projects, like the renovation of the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado. Inevitably, on big projects like these, she has to work closely with men. But having them as clients, rather than working in their corporation, is the way Wilson prefers it.
I hate to use the word chauvinistic because I don't like that term, but there are definitely men that I have dealt with, clients that have problem with women, doing business with women.
How do you get that? How do you...
You just feel it. I mean, you just feel it, when you're the one dealing with them, but they continually call the male in the office.
Even though the male works for you?
Even though the male works for you and you're the head, they just feel, it's a comfort level, I think. It's just a comfort level of feeling better doing business with the male. And fortunately, we have enough males here that we can do that.
I've always said along the way that when I go into a new position at Sears, that it takes 6 months to overcome in each individual employee's mind what a woman manager must be. Because they relate you to an aunt, a mother, a teacher, someone who was an authority over them as a female at one point in their life. So after you overcome that, then you spend the second 6 months proving to them that you have the intelligence and the experience and the decision-making ability to be in your position. Somewhere along after the first year, all of a sudden when you say, I want this done, and I want it done immediately, they don't stop and ask, well, who does she think she is?
Sometimes the response is unintentional, but the effect the same, as when Hix introduced herself to a Sears salesman named Ray.
When I left, I said, Ray, I would like for you to do something for me. And I don't recall what it was, but he turned around to me and he said, all right, honey, I'll get that done. And I said, Ray, I want you to know something. It's all right for you to call me honey. Absolutely all right to call me honey. However, it will be Ms. Honey when you refer to me as honey.
For women like Gloria Hix and Beverly Brooks, being in control is a natural outgrowth of their non-corporate lives. It was an absolute necessity for Brooks, a divorced mother of 3 whose survival depended on being in control, of earning a living. The first job that she felt qualified to do was secretarial.
I got the job the day I applied for it. It scared me to death, and I said, perhaps you don't understand. I do not know anything about insurance. He said, well, you said you knew how to type. You can start to work on Monday. But after about a year, the manager at the insurance office said, you know, if you're going to work this many hours a day, work that hard, I have a deal for you. I think you could sell insurance. And I said, I can't sell anything, and I don't know anything about insurance. And he said, I think that you need to try it. I wished I had played football, because I really did learn something that men knew that I didn't know. I observed that men do not like everybody. They just know that it takes a certain number of people to play on that team. Just like in football, you got to have all the positions filled. And you don't particularly have to like them. You don't particularly have to respect them. Everybody just has to fill their position on the team, and then the team goes forward and does good.
You think that's, you reject that?
I don't reject it. I just didn't understand that.
I think if I were critical of corporate managers at this point, I would say that we still, in considering a woman for a higher level management job, have a tendency to think of the reasons why we shouldn't give her the job or she couldn't do the job, whereas with a man, we think of all the reasons why we should. We'll see a woman in the boardroom at Sears one of these days.
Ideas have begun to change, attitudes have begun to change, and I think that we're still many years away from it being anywhere near equal. I think it still prevails in the corporate environment that women who survive and do well have to do better than their male counterpart. So I think a lot of attitudes have changed, but I think it's a long way to go before women don't have to pay a greater price than men do.
What's your view of the glass ceiling? Does it exist, and why?
It exists, and it's changing all the time. Maybe it's more a jello ceiling than a glass one, because in different industries and it's moving at different rates. There are some corporations that have very much seen the light, and I know Felice will address that. But I believe that overall, across the country, that ceiling is still pretty firmly in place.
Your view on that, the glass ceiling?
I don't think any of us knows yet whether there is a glass ceiling. After all, the first huge generation of women gung-ho on success and ready to work for it entered corporate management only 7 years ago. It takes 20 years to move from entry level to senior management. But
even for men, you mean?
For everybody. But there is a screen. The shape of the pyramid demands it. If you cut that pyramid horizontally into 4 parts, the top quarter, only 3% of the inhabitants of the pyramid reside in that top quarter. So there has to be a screening process. But a ceiling implies impenetrability. It's not impenetrable. It's a permeable membrane. We know how to pull men through. We have to learn how to pull women through.
But from everything I read, women who get to that ceiling of glass or jello or whatever else it is, get so frustrated that they take what they refer to as the pink parachute. They opt out. They leave totally because they find the impenetrability just too long.
Well, I don't think that the determinant of what's going to happen with women is women's perception. I think it's business's perception, and particularly corporate perception, because corporations have the power and affluence to affect change, and they're the leadership group. And I think that the reason that women feel frustrated is multifaceted. In part, they've been living for those 6 or 7 years that they've been there in a world created by men for men, and they've experienced more stress. At the same time, they came in really focused on their careers, and then suddenly heard their biological clocks tick. So those converge just at the point, those tensions, just at the point that they have to make the same conversion that men have from management to leadership. And it's difficult for them to do that. Now, it's in the corporate interest to start to think about it, and I think they are thinking about it, thinking about making it possible for that woman to make that transition by virtue, for instance, of mounting and formulating sound parental leave policies so that a woman isn't suddenly overwhelmed when she comes back to work cold turkey from Friday at home full-time to the workplace Monday full-time.
Kate, is that why women are leaving?
No.
The biological clock?
No, say I. Well, I think that the confluence of the biological clock and the career frustration is not necessarily true. Yes, there are women for whom that has been true, but there are a lot whom I know anecdotally. Now, granted, there are no huge numbers at the top, who have indeed become frustrated and have left because they have literally seen younger men, sometimes men they've trained, being jumped over them. Now, the corporations that Felice is talking about are the good guys. And I think that Felice single-handedly made some of them the good guys. But she can't be in all 44,000 large companies at the same time. And a great many women, the enormous rush of women into starting their own businesses that began about 5 years ago is certainly in part due to the concern that these women who felt they were being passed over have felt.
What is it in the corporate environment with men as they relate to women? They just don't like them there, or what is it?
Well, you know, a woman who has been the chief executive officer of a well-known corporation says the problem with senior business management now, the men who are in it now, is that they've never had a woman as a friend. They've had them as mothers, wives, lovers, and secretaries, but never as a friend. And one of the people on the film referred to the comfort level. At the very top, the comfort level becomes very important. You're dealing with big numbers.
How much of that, Felice, do you think, I don't know whether you disagree or agree, but you can respond in this question, because I read that women are such small numbers at this level that their gender-related concerns, they never express them because of fear of being ostracized or whatever. Are women as much at fault in this as a male corporate mentality, perhaps?
Well, I think that there's a lot. Really, the burden is on the male mentality, especially as you move beyond the middle. Because the woman, ironically, who's most apt to be able to make it to the top, who has a primary commitment to her career, who has extraordinary talent and ability, and who has those characteristics that we think traditionally of as male characteristics: aggression, competitiveness, moxie, risk-taking, is really an anomaly still to the chief executive officer. She is so unlike his wife. And he has not yet turned the switch and started to think of her not as a woman who has a lot of aggression, but as an individual who has a tremendous contribution to make, and that's about to happen.
Well, what's going to make that change in attitude? Is it going to take a whole generation, as Beverly Brooks said, and a whole new generation of men, or what?
It has to start changing pretty quickly. At this point, over half of the top educations in this country are going to women, and the trained labor field is dwindling at an astonishing rate. I think that the corporations that are good, the ones that Felice knows and speaks to, have looked out and seen that if they don't make it possible for the good women, the trained, educated women, to be as productive as they humanly can be, they're going to be in trouble, and so, frankly, is the country.
Is this going to make a difference? We're talking about corporate level women now, but if the change that Kate is talking about happens, I mean, is this going to make any difference for women generally?
Yes. First of all, I think that we're right at the border of a corporate awareness of the resource that women represent. Right now, the seams of middle management are bursting with the baby boom generation, so they haven't quite realized the shortage that's just over the hill. But as soon as they do, I think they are going to they're going to identify the high performers early and make it possible for them to move up. And when a critical mass comes in the circle of vision of the CEO, the chief executive officer, it will open things for all women.
Let's hope so.